Welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time. And as you may have heard, I'm Chris Cokinos. I'll introduce both Helen Schell and Julie Swarstad Johnson here in a moment. They'll have 10, 15, 20 minutes or so for presentations. And at about 15 minutes before the top of the hour, um, we can move into a question and answer session for Julie and Helen. Julie, a friend I know from the University of Arizona, is the author of Pennsylvania Furnace, which was an editor's choice selection for the Unicorn Press first book series here in the U.S. And was co-editor. We worked together on Beyond Earth's Edge, the Poetry of Spaceflight from the University of Arizona Press. She has a new book of poems about the night sky called Night Letters, forthcoming from the University of New Mexico Press. She's been a poet in residence at Gettysburg National Military Park, which led to a chapbook of poems, and at Lowell Observatory in northern Arizona. And 2 years ago, already in March 2024, she was a crew member for Imagination One, a simulated lunar mission with an all-artist crew that took place in the original test module of Biosphere 2. She lives and works in Tucson. She is an archivist and librarian at the University of Arizona Poetry Center, which I recommend to you if you're ever visiting that part of the world. So we will pass the baton over to you in Tucson.
Greetings to you all, as Chris said, from Tucson, Arizona. I'm in the United States. I'm in the Sonoran Desert, which is a beautiful, biodiverse place. So I'm a poet, as Chris mentioned, and in my professional life, I work as an archivist and librarian at the University of Arizona Poetry Center, which is home to one of the largest library collections of poetry in North America. And it's just kind of behind me, which you probably can't see much of. But if you are ever in Arizona, I hope you'll come visit us. In my writing, common themes are nature, history, and science. But in recent years, I've really honed in on space exploration, astronomy, and the night sky. And so in this time, I'll sort of walk you through my development in writing in those fields, and then kind of show you how I ended up being in the Moonbound book with the piece that's in there. I've been interested in astronomy and space exploration since I was a child, as I think many people are expressing similar interests, but it was always kind of a peripheral interest and not one of my main focuses. But interestingly, it really came to the forefront for me when I began working at the Poetry Center in 2015. In the Poetry Center's magnificent library, I was surprised by the number of poems I found about space exploration specifically, and by a truly astonishing range of writers. Writers who expressed skepticism, writers who expressed excitement, and who were writing throughout the whole history of space exploration. So in 2016, I put together a library exhibit, which you're seeing some images of here, which featured poems, many of the poems that I had found. I was able to pair them with paintings by the noted space artist Robert McCall, if you've ever come across his work. Many of his paintings are held by the University of Arizona Museum of Art, as well as many of his notebooks, and like his full archives are there. So I was able to get some of those pieces on loan, as you're seeing, and pair those with poems about spaceflight by contemporary artists. One of my colleagues noticed just the absolutely enormous folder that I had full of poems on this topic. And so she suggested the idea of having, have you ever thought of an anthology? So a collection of all of those works published as a book. And if you are thinking about space and poetry, you really should know Christopher Cokinos, who is familiar to you all. So that led to this book, Beyond Earth's Edge, The Poetry of Spaceflight, which was co-edited by myself and Chris, and was published by the University of Arizona Press in 2020. Beyond Earth's Edge brings together more than 80 poets writing about space exploration from the launch of Sputnik all the way through the various eras of space exploration, both human and robotic, I would note. And then also there's a section at the end that includes poems kind of imagining human futures and non-human futures in space exploration, in outer space. Within those 80 poets, there are two writers who are also included in Moonbound, the poets Kyle Dargan and Kim Stanley Robinson, who's also a novelist, and writer in many other ways. So I will read to you the poem that I wrote to be included in the book. It's included in the Robotic Explorer section, so the section focused on non-human missions to explore outer space. And I wrote this thinking about the OSIRIS-REx mission, which is tied to the University of Arizona and which sent a spacecraft to the asteroid Bennu to collect a sample and then return to Earth. There's also some mentions of the New Horizons mission to Pluto in this poem. But so this is my contribution to Beyond Earth's Edge, titled Psalm 8. If you let it, the moon will tell you your smallness. Fragile creature on a tilted planet, facing the open darkness while the sun burns on beyond your sight. We have so long now denied that we think we are the center. The Copernican sun firmly anchored in the sky we swing through. But I write to you as one who knows her own heart. So I say to you, blessed is the wild distance of the night, the gauzy light of nebulas reaching us long after they're gone. Blessed are the asteroids, those fragments of the beginning which we did not create. Blessed the spacecraft that goes to bring a peace back to us. The origin of oceans may be written in its dust. Blessed, too, those machines that go without thought of return, the glimpses they send back of worlds we thought we knew, the opalescent whirls of storms churning on Jupiter, liquid pooled deep beneath the south pole of Mars, faintest sunlight kindling Pluto's peaks of ice, bright as sacred flame. Blessed, all the universe beyond us, and we, who hunger and thirst to know it, shadowed on the earth, calculating the trajectories of light. So I do recommend this book to you, not just because I edited it, but because really the incredible work of the poets contained therein. You'll find pieces written by Chris and myself contextualizing sort of each of the eras of space exploration. And you'll find a poem by Chris on early space exploration, thinking about the connection between the Nazi creation of rockets and then how that then came into the United States and became something very different, but with that shadow still attached to it. Kyle and Kim, both of their poems are in the imagined futures section. And so Kyle's is this imagined scene of the universe or scene of the solar system as the sun expands and eats up the inner planets. Kim's is a depiction of life on Mars, and both are wonderful poems. So Chris and I spent about 5 years putting Beyond Earth's Edge together, which meant that I was deeply immersed in thinking about space exploration for a long time and thinking about those poems. During COVID, I had been working on a very different project, but really wasn't able to keep going with it for various reasons. And so I found the night sky turning up in my poems very frequently. And so I decided to really focus my attention on that. In 2022, I was able to spend a week at Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff as a poet in residence. And Lowell Observatory is the place where Pluto was discovered in 1930. So that was a great connection for me. It was also one of the places where, for me as a child, I was really struck by astronomy and seeing the amazing telescopes, not the one I'm with in this photograph, but those historic large telescopes, studying the night sky. But so in 2022, again, I spent a week as a poet in residence, and I was able to spend a night kind of riding along with one of the astronomers at one of their large research telescopes. So this is me looking very excited with the 4.3 meter Lowell Discovery Telescope, which was really an amazing joy. So the poems from this period of writing, including that poem I read for you, Psalm 8, eventually came together into a manuscript that I titled The Night Season. And I'm very excited to say it finally found a home with the University of New Mexico Press, and it's forthcoming in January 2027. So more to come on that if you're interested. But I will just read, well, actually, let me see. I'm looking at the time. Let me keep going so we're on track. But more to come on that front if you're interested. So during this time of writing those poems, I was also continuing to think about human space exploration. Again, thanks to Chris, who's a big ideas person, and I appreciate so much. Chris had a vision to put together an all-artist crew for a simulated lunar mission. Biosphere 2, which is the famed Earth Systems Research Center, that huge white-framed sort of terrarium structure, is located just about an hour outside of Tucson. And Biosphere 2 at this time had recently become home to a place called the Space Analogue for the Moon and Mars, also known as SAM, which is a high-fidelity, hermetically sealed habitat where crews can simulate missions to the Moon and Mars, creating a testing ground on Earth for new ideas, approaches, and technologies that can then hopefully be applied to things in actual space exploration. In March 2024, the Imagination One mission took place, and you're seeing the crew here with four multidisciplinary artists. Just to quickly tell you who they are, starting on the left is Elizabeth George, who's a dancer and choreographer, professor of dance here at the University of Arizona. Next is Chris Cokinos, a nonfiction writer and professor emeritus at the U of A. Ivy Wahome is a textiles artist who was a graduate student at the time of the mission. And then myself on the other end as a poet, and then also as a staff member at the university. So as far as we know, we were the first multidisciplinary analog astronaut crew. There was one crew of all painters previously in another location, but I think we're the first one that's all multiple disciplines. So that was very exciting. We were sealed inside SAM for 6 days and 5 nights, and our mission goal was to demonstrate the value of the arts in space exploration, to inspire people to embrace a just and sustainable approach to space exploration, but also to show that the arts are really foundational as a source of compassion and accuracy in relationship to these places where we hope to live in an ethical way. For those 6 days of the mission, we worked to maintain the habitat and we undertook solo and collaborative artistic projects. We also conducted extravehicular activity with an offset gravity rig outside of the habitat, which was really incredible. I'll read the one poem that I really completed during the mission, and it has a title that comes from the Scottish selenographer James Naismith, who in the 19th century spent quite a lot of time studying the moon through a telescope, and who described seeing the moon through a telescope in that way as becoming in thought or being in thought a lunar being. So this is my poem, To Be in Thought, a Lunar Being, which expresses some of what we experienced during the mission. To be in thought, a lunar being. Anywhere we go, the body must be fed and held against something, rock or the motion of endless falling, metal or the sound another human makes, while working needle through fabric, thought across time's finest length. Anywhere we go, the mind will fall inward through the distance that divides the eye from the flash thought threads between neurons, between sunlight through Earth's atmosphere and the hard shadows cast by the moon's rounded peaks. We travel in thought past wind moving the shades, or we find we cannot, the pull of Earth's metal core too much to forget. Tend now to breath and the color it threads through every vein. Tend the smallest leaves reaching through lunar dust in a test tube, and mushrooms' ribbed throats curling toward Earth's imagined disk above. Home mirrors home. What we leave, sending back what can never stay behind, sown through flesh and dream, through sudden horizon. So collaboration has continued beyond the mission. Liz was recently able to set this poem to a dance piece that she choreographed for students here at the U of A, and which was performed in a spring dance show. It was really amazing to see dancers moving to a reading of this poem. So as the mission finished, I continued to work through thinking about it, writing about it, trying to put together a narrative of that time. And I found as I was writing the sequence of poems, I found myself writing a sequence of poems in a form called the haibun. It's a poetic form created by the 17th century Japanese poet Basho, and it combines prose with haiku. Basho and then subsequent poets used it mainly for travelogues, so it can contain the detail of thinking about one's experiences with these moments of poetic reverie and really concise, sharp images. When the call for Moonbound came, I was in the midst of writing these poems, and I still am. But so I decided to write my response to the question of the book in this haibun form. But I found myself really wrestling with the inability of moving beyond my human perspective. Everything I wrote, even thinking about the moon from Earth, was really the Earth from the moon from my human perspective. So eventually I got to a really different question, which then starts this poem. So this is my contribution to the Moonbound book. But how does the moon see itself? Complete, a gray sweep in a million shades, the felt depths dark contains, open to what would shape it, crater rims and ejecta slicing bright across the surface, as smooth shouldered rock fall, as a sieve letting light drop through, as a silence moving through silence. A song never heard but known underground, where lava tubes stretch like indrawn breath. Moon as patience, moon as remembered heat amidst cold and cold amidst heat. Long memory laced through regolith where earth twines too. Changelessly changing, blue spun with white, whirling against the stars' imperceptible drift. Earth, the second tone in a living chord. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I'm looking forward to hearing and learning more about your contributions to this book. Here's my contact information, but I'd love to hear more about your work as well.